My boyfriend told me, "I wish you'd just leave me alone." I replied, "Wish granted." Then I removed his building access. He smirked when he said it, like he expected me to cry, chase him, or beg him to explain what he really meant. But by morning, his things were packed for a documented pickup. His older sister was begging me to call him, and a few weeks later, a judge was reviewing his voicemails in a formal hearing. Hello, everyone. My name is Marina Ellis. I'm 35, and I've always been the kind of woman who takes people at their word. Not because I'm cold, and not because I don't understand emotion. I do. Sometimes I understand it too well. But I learned a long time ago that when someone says something clearly, especially in a relationship, pretending they meant something softer only delays the damage. Elliot and I had been together for a little over 2 years. We were not married, but our lives had blended in quiet, practical ways. His coffee sat in my kitchen cabinet. His jackets hung beside mine near the door. His charger stayed plugged into the outlet by my side of the bed because he always forgot where he left it. The apartment was under my name. That had been a practical decision when we moved in. My credit was stronger, my job was stable, and Elliot said it made sense. Back then, it felt like teamwork. Later, I realized it had also made me the safety net. For most of our relationship, things were steady. Not perfect, but steady. But over the last few months, something changed. Elliot became distant in small ways that were easy to excuse. Conversations got shorter. His answers became clipped. He looked at his phone more than he looked at me. Then came the little corrections. Don't make this emotional. You always read too much into things. Can you just let something be simple for once? Each sentence was small enough to survive on its own, but together they built something heavy. I started feeling like I was walking around the edges of his moods, careful not to touch anything that might collapse. The argument that ended everything started over something ordinary. I had asked him why he had changed plans without telling me. He was standing near the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone, while I stood by the sink with a mug of tea cooling in my hands. "You said we were going together," I said. He didn't look up. "I changed my mind." "You changed your mind, or you decided I didn't need to know." That was when he finally looked at me. His expression wasn't angry. It was worse. It was bored. "Marina, I don't have the energy for this." For a second, I almost apologized. That old instinct rose in me, the one that wanted to smooth the room before the sharpness spread. But I stopped myself. "I'm not trying to fight," I said. "I'm trying to understand why I'm being treated like an afterthought." He laughed once, under his breath. That little laugh told me more than his answer did. "You know what?" he said. "I wish you'd just leave me alone." The room went still. I stared at him, waiting for the flicker of regret that usually comes after someone says something too harsh. It never came. Instead, his mouth curved into a smirk, and something inside me tightened, not with anger, but with the sick, quiet realization that he knew exactly where the sentence would land. I set the mug down carefully. "Do you mean that?" "I'm serious," he said. "Just leave me alone." That second sentence changed everything. The first one could have been frustration. The second one was confirmation. For 2 years, I had softened his words. I had translated his distance into stress. I had turned his dismissiveness into tiredness. But standing in that kitchen, listening to him say it twice, I understood something I had been avoiding. He didn't want peace. He wanted control over when I stayed and when I disappeared. So I gave him exactly what he asked for. I said, "Okay." That was all. No yelling, no crying, no speech about how much I had done for him. Just one word. Elliot blinked, like the answer had landed wrong. "What does that mean?" "It means okay." That night, I didn't ask him to talk. I didn't knock on the bedroom door after he shut it. I didn't send a long message from the living room explaining my feelings in paragraphs he would later call dramatic. I slept on the couch with my phone face down beside me, but I didn't sleep much. I kept replaying the smirk, because sometimes the betrayal is not in what someone says. It is in how comfortable they look while saying it. By morning, I had made my decision. Not out of anger, out of clarity. Elliot wanted to be left alone, so I was going to leave him alone completely. The next morning didn't feel dramatic. There was no shouting, no slamming doors, no final speech where I listed everything he had done wrong. I woke before him, the apartment still dim with early morning light, and for a moment, I just stood in the hallway looking at the bedroom door. 2 years, and that door had never felt like a boundary before. Now it did. I opened my laptop and pulled up the lease. I read every line slowly, carefully, with a heaviness in my chest that I refused to let become panic. The apartment was in my name. Elliot was not on the lease. I checked the clauses about occupancy, building access, notice, and removal of personal belongings. I didn't want revenge. I wanted procedure, because procedure was the only thing that could protect me from being dragged back into an emotional argument he would later rewrite. When Elliot finally came out of the bedroom, I was already dressed. "You're up early," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah." He opened the fridge like nothing had happened. "Are you still upset about last night?" That word almost made me smile. Upset, like this was temporary. "No," I said. "I'm not upset." He leaned against the counter. "So, we're good?" "You asked me to leave you alone," I said. "So I am." "That's not what I meant." I didn't respond right away. I let the sentence sit between us, because that was what he always did. Said something sharp, then expected me to soften it for him. "You're taking it too literally," he added. "Maybe," I said. "But I'm taking it seriously." That landed harder than I expected. "So what? You're just going to ignore me now?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm going to respect what you asked for." Then I left. I didn't go far. Just to a quiet cafe a few blocks away where I sat by the window with coffee I barely touched. My hands were steady, but my chest felt hollow in a way I didn't want to name. Part of me still wanted him to call and say, "I was cruel, I'm sorry." Not because it would fix everything, but because some small, tired part of me still wanted proof that the man I loved understood the wound he had made. He didn't call. When I got back, he was gone, but his keys were still on the counter, his charger still plugged in, his jacket still hanging by the door. He hadn't left. He had stepped out. Temporary. Like everything else had always been for him. That was when I started packing his things. Not throwing them, not destroying them, folding them, sorting them, photographing each box before sealing it. I made a list, labeled everything, and sent one clear message through text so there would be a record. "Your belongings are packed and available for scheduled pickup. Please confirm a time with Lena," or through written message. Then I opened the building access app. His code was still active. I stared at it for a few seconds, not because I doubted myself, but because I understood that once I pressed save, the relationship would stop being a fight and become a fact. I removed his personal building access code after confirming the lease terms, then saved the change. No sound. No dramatic alert. Just a quiet shift in reality. He could still arrange pickup. He could still contact me in writing. He could still retrieve what belonged to him. But he could no longer walk into my home like nothing had changed. The calls started that evening. At first, they were spaced out, like he still believed I would answer once I calmed down. Then they came closer together, Elliot calling. I looked at the screen, didn't answer. The messages followed. "Where are you? Why isn't my code working? Are you serious right now?" I read them, but I didn't respond. My thumb hovered over the screen more than once, and every time I had to remind myself that answering would pull me back into the same old pattern. He would say something cruel, I would explain my hurt, and by the end, somehow I would be the one apologizing for reacting. Then came the first voicemail. I waited until the apartment was still before I played it. "Marina, okay, look, I didn't mean it like that." His voice filled the room, familiar enough to hurt. There was a pause. "I was just frustrated. You know how you get sometimes. You push things." I stopped it. My throat tightened, but not from surprise, from recognition. Even inside an apology, he was already building a door out for himself. He was sorry, but only if I accepted part of the blame. My phone rang again. This time it was Lena, his older sister. I answered. "Hey," she said carefully. "I just got off the phone with Elliot. He told me something happened." Something did. "He says you locked him out." "I removed his building access after checking the lease," I said. "His belongings are packed, documented, and available for scheduled pickup." "That's a big step, Marina." "It is." "What happened?" So I told her the sequence. Not every feeling, not every wound, just what happened. "We had an argument. He told me twice to leave him alone, so I did." Silence. Then Lena said, "He didn't mean it like that. He said it twice." "I know, but maybe things escalated too quickly." It didn't escalate, I said. It followed through. That stopped her. A few moments later, her voice softened. He's panicking. The word landed in my chest harder than I expected. For a second, I pictured him pacing outside, angry and frightened, realizing the door he thought would always open for him no longer did. I felt the old guilt rise, the familiar urge to make his discomfort smaller. But then I remembered his smirk, and guilt became grief. I'm not trying to hurt him, I said. I'm doing what he asked, and I'm doing it in writing. Lena exhaled. I'll talk to him. That night, Elliot came to the building. He couldn't get in with his code, so he called, messaged, and eventually knocked after another resident let him into the lobby. Marina, he said through the door, come on. I stood inside the apartment, my hand wrapped around a glass of water. I could hear him so clearly that for a moment memory tried to betray me. The same voice that used to ask if I wanted dinner, the same voice that used to say my name softly in the morning. But now that voice was saying, this isn't how people handle things. I didn't open the door. Instead, I sent one message. You asked for space. Your belongings are packed and documented. Please arrange pickup in writing. 3 dots appeared, then, not like this. I stared at the words until they blurred slightly. Not like this. That meant he wanted the performance of distance, not the consequence of it. Another message came from Lena. He didn't think you were serious. I looked at that sentence for a long time because it wasn't just about that night. It was about the whole relationship. He didn't think I was serious when I said I felt dismissed. He didn't think I was serious when I said I was tired of being treated like an inconvenience. He didn't think I was serious because I had always stayed gentle enough for him to ignore. Not anymore. The next morning, there were no new calls. For the first time, the apartment felt fully mine again, but it didn't feel victorious. It felt quiet in the way a room feels after someone has taken all the warmth with them and left only the shape of where they used to be. His boxes were still near the door. I photographed them again, sent Lena the pickup window, and kept everything in writing. Around mid-morning, Lena called. He left, she said. I figured. He didn't go home. I looked toward the window. Okay. He's not handling this well. I swallowed the ache in my throat before answering. I'm not trying to hurt him. I know, she said softly. I think I know that now. Her tone had changed. The day before, she had been trying to pull me back into a conversation. Now she sounded like someone who had finally heard enough of both sides to understand the shape of the truth. He left you more voicemails, she said. You might want to listen to all of them. So I did, one by one. Marina, this has gone far enough. You made your point. You can't just decide to keep me out of my own place. I'm sorry, all right? You always do this. You take one thing and blow it up. Each voicemail hurt in a different way. Not because I wanted him back, but because every recording confirmed what I had been trying not to admit. Even when he was afraid of losing access to me, he still couldn't speak to me without trying to make me responsible for his fear. I saved everything. Messages, voicemails, screenshots of the pickup offer, photos of the boxes, the lease clauses, the building access log. I didn't know yet if I would need it. I only knew that if the story was ever told outside the apartment, I wanted the truth to arrive with timestamps. A week later, the notice came. Elliot had filed a complaint claiming I had denied him access to belongings and forced him out without warning. For a few seconds, I just stood there with the paper in my hand, feeling the old version of myself tremble beneath the surface. The version who would have panicked. The version who would have called him immediately and said, "Why are you doing this?" But I didn't call. I sat down, spread the documents across the table, and let myself breathe through the hurt before it turned into fear. He was still trying to turn my boundary into cruelty, still trying to make my order look like chaos. But this time, I had the record. By the time it reached a formal court review, nothing felt dramatic anymore. The room was smaller than I expected. Neutral walls, a long table, papers stacked neatly in front of people who had no emotional investment in what happened, only an interest in what could be proven. Elliot sat across from me. He looked different there, not softer, smaller, like the confidence he carried in private didn't know how to survive under fluorescent lights and formal questions. I kept my hands folded in my lap. My stomach was tight, and my heart was beating faster than I wanted to admit, But I refused to let my face tell a story my documents didn't need help telling. The timeline was presented first. The argument, the repeated request, the lease, the access change, the documented pickup offer, the messages. Then came the voicemails. The first one played. "Marina, okay, look, I didn't mean it like that." His voice sounded smaller in the room. Then another. "You made your point. Just open the door when I come back." Then another. "You can't just decide to keep me out of my own place." And then, "I'm sorry, all right? You always do this. You take one thing and blow it up." The room stayed calm, but something shifted. Not loudly, not theatrically, just enough for the truth to stop needing assistance. The contradiction was sitting there by itself. He had asked to be left alone. I had created distance. He had been offered a documented pickup. He had refused the structure, then called the consequence unfair. The judge asked a few clarifying questions. I answered simply. I didn't embellish. I didn't cry. I didn't try to make Elliot look worse. I didn't have to. His own words had already done that. When the recordings ended, I finally looked at him. Just once. He wasn't angry anymore. He looked aware. And maybe that was the first honest moment we had shared in a long time. A few weeks after everything was finalized, the situation stopped feeling active. No more messages, no more calls, no more attempts to reconnect or reframe what happened. It just settled. People asked me later if I regretted how I handled it, if I thought I had taken things too far, if I would have done anything differently knowing how it would end. I thought about it carefully, because regret only makes sense when you believe there was a better version of the outcome, and I couldn't find one. Not one that didn't require me to ignore what was said, not one that didn't involve me translating his cruelty into confusion, not one where I stayed in a space where my presence depended on his mood. So I told them the truth. "It wasn't the argument that changed everything," I said. "It was the moment his words stopped being temporary and started being treated like a decision. Because respecting what someone says fully doesn't escalate a situation. It reveals it. I never removed Elliot's access out of anger. I did it because I finally understood something I had been avoiding for too long. If someone asks you to leave them alone and you actually do it, you're not losing them. You're seeing them clearly, and once you see someone clearly, you don't go back to guessing."